Hello everyone, so today we are going to be making garlic dough balls. Okay, first thing we need to do is wash your hands, wipe your surfaces, apron on if you want to wear one, all the basic health and hygiene things that you have to do on any cooking session. I've done that already, I'm ready to go. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to put on a little oven. And my little oven has a very low setting for heat because we want to try and make our dough balls prove. And proving is where they are rising, but really slowly. You're probably going to need to do this for somewhere around the 90-minute mark. So that's the first thing I need to do to make sure that proving oven is nice and warm. And then I'm going to start making my dough. So on my oven, I have got a little oven here, and I used this at a very low temperature. You can see that if I then turn it on, it will just sit comfortably at about 50 degrees. To prove your garlic dough balls, I want it somewhere between 50 and 75. So there's good. And as you can see, the lights come on, ready to prove my dough balls. I'm going to leave that closed for now. You don't have to put your dough balls in an oven. You can just leave them in a warm place. If your kitchen is quite warm, just leave them in the room. That will be just as good, but you might need to increase the proving time. So somewhere from 90 minutes up to 2 hours. If you're in a rush and you can't prove, then don't worry. I'll explain a bit later on as to how you can get around this. So today's objectives, as you can see from the recipe slide, is you're learning how to make a simple bread roll. And you're learning the skill of kneading and proving, okay? We're making garlic dough balls today. We're also going to be melting butter. That's another little skill to learn. Mixing in the garlic and then baking your bread. Baking bread is really tricky. You have to follow the steps correctly. If you don't, it can go really hard, your bread, or in most cases, it'll be undercooked. So have a look at the recipe, follow it really clearly, and we should be okay. So let's get started. Step 1, preheat the oven. Done. Step 2, mix the flour, salt, sugar into a bowl. So we're going to weigh all those things out now and get them ready. So first thing we need to do is making sure that we are weighing out our ingredients. You need to use strong white flour. Okay, it won't work so well with plain flour. It needs to be strong. It's got more gluten in. It's going to bring it together as a dough a little bit better, and it helps to activate the yeast. So yeast works by taking the sugar from the mix. That's what helps activate the yeast, and the yeast then starts to create carbon dioxide gas. That carbon dioxide creates the bubbles that you need to make your bread nice and light and fluffy. So once you've got your flour, you need to make sure you keep mixing in the salt and the sugar that you should have added by now. How much salt and sugar you need is on the recipe, 1 teaspoon of each. And now the tricky bit. So I have measured 100 millilitres of warm water, and then I'm going to add my yeast to the water. Not everybody does this, but I find it activates the yeast a little bit quicker. So here's my yeast. There's my 1 teaspoon that you need, and it's going in. And I'm going to give that a good old mix up. You should, if the water's warm enough, you should, after giving that a good mix for a minute, start to get a bit of a froth on top of the water. That's good, that means the yeast is activating. You can see we're starting to get a few bubbles in our pot of warm water and yeast. And now the yeast needs some sugar. And it takes some sugar from the sugar teaspoon that we've placed into our bowl already. And it also takes the sugar from the starch that is in the flour. So this bit is really tricky. You need to add in your yeast and water to your flour. Do not do it all in one go. A little bit at a time, and then you can mix with your hands. If you do it all at one time, what happens is it's going to be so sticky, you're going to add more flour, and then you're going to take the balance away of the different ingredients. We don't really want to be adding flour unless we have to. And then once you've had a good mix, we can add a little bit more. And the good thing is if you feel like your dough's come together really nicely, you don't have to use that last bit of water and yeast. you can stick with what you've got. If you have mixed all your ingredients together, you will start to get a dough that looks like this. Now, if you feel your dough is a little bit hard, the way to soften it up, and this may sound strange, the way to soften it up is to beat it, okay? The technique of beating that I find works best is if you roll it up into a ball and then you throw it down really hard onto your work surface and just keep repeating that and just keep repeating. Keep repeating, and then it should soften up your dough. And you want it as soft as possible. That's what's going to make your dough balls really, really light. So I've been doing this for about 5 minutes now, and you can see already how much softer my dough is. Another 5 minutes should do it. So I'm up to about 7 minutes now, and as you can see, it's going really, really soft. So just like that, down hard, then give it a squash, roll it out, and then go again. Keep going. Just be careful it doesn't go off your work surface to the floor, because then you have to start the whole process again. And we are nearly there. What this is doing is that it's keeping the dough nice and warm. That impact is creating heat, and that's the heat that we need to keep in that dough to keep the yeast activated. That's really crucial, otherwise your bread's going to be really, really stodgy. So when you're happy and your dough's nice and soft, I'm really quite pleased with that. Looks nice and soft and squashy, that's what we want. The kneading process. This is one of the objectives today. It's really tricky to get right. So here's the demo. Dough's in a ball, palm on top, you push into the table, like so, fold over on itself, and push with your palm again. Fold over on itself, and push. Over, push. Over, push. And the quicker you can do this, the warmer it stays, and the even softer your dough will be. Have a go. So after you have kneaded your dough, after you have beat your dough up, it should be nice and soft. And that is perfect. So we're now going to place our dough back inside our bowl and cover it with a clean tea towel. And then that goes in your proving drawer. Or if you haven't got a proving drawer, it goes somewhere in your kitchen that's nice and warm. It has to be warm. Okay, so you may want to put your oven on and put it at the back of the oven where the heat starts to escape. But it needs to be somewhere nice and warm. If you can leave it for around 90 minutes, that would be perfect. If you're unable to prove because you're short of time, you just need to be leaving it for about 10 to 15 minutes to settle. Okay. So I explained that if you haven't got time to prove, what you can do is that after you've kneaded your dough, place it in your bowl, put your tea towel over the top like you would do normally ready to prove, leave it for 5 or so 10 minutes in a nice warm place. At that point, take your tea towel back off, get your dough back out again, and then give it a really good, quick, hard knead, okay? And that will soften the dough up. You may at this point want to add a little bit of warm water and maybe an extra dusting of flour on your work surface. That will soften the dough up. You need to make sure your dough is as soft as possible. If you're in a rush, this is a little method to speed the process up. So quick take 5 for you. Number 1, what is yeast? Number 2, what is the scientific term for sugar? And number 3, what is the name of the gas produced by yeast, and do you know its chemical symbol? As you can see, the dough, after it's proved, has doubled in size. Okay, a bit crusty on the outside. What we now need to do is a process called knocking back, and all that is kneading again. So let's give that a go. So after you have knocked back your dough, and it's back to its soft original size, now you need to break your dough out into different small size balls ready for the garlic to go on top. I've split the dough into 6 small dough balls, and I've used some greaseproof paper. If you don't have any, don't worry, a sprinkle of flour on the bottom of your baking tray will do, but greaseproof paper is better because when you add the garlic butter later, you're not going to get all the burn and sticky marks on your bacon tray. Just makes your bacon tray last a bit longer. Time to bake. You want to put your dough balls in for around 20 minutes, but keep checking them. Don't let them get too hard or crispy on the outside. Make sure your temperature of your oven is correct, because if it's too hot, they go crispy on the outside, raw in the middle. And if it's too cold, you just won't cook. So what you need to do now is to melt your butter. And as you can see, over a low heat, because you do not want to be cranking that heat up with butter melting, because it can be very dangerous. Over a low heat, I am then just going to give my butter a stir in my saucepan. I'm using a stainless steel spoon, because if I use a wooden spoon, when I add the garlic, I can never really get rid of that garlicky taste from the spoon. So I like to use a stainless steel spoon because it's much easier to wash off. And you can see it's melting nicely. We're not getting too many bubbles, it's not boiling. We don't want to do that because of the fat in that butter could be quite dangerous. Nice low heat, continually stirring. And you can see it's nearly turned from a solid to a liquid. And that big chunk has nearly melted down. Perfect. At that point, I'm then going to turn my heat off. And then I'm going to add in my garlic. Unfortunately, at the shop today, I couldn't get any fresh garlic, but I do have some garlic granules. And I'm going to add a little bit of garlic in, a little bit of a shake. Not too much, don't need too much. Garlic, as you know, is a very strong taste and flavour. And then I'm going to stir. And if you find that the garlic isn't really dissolving, add a little bit of heat back on, but keep it low. And keep stirring, keep stirring, keep stirring. So whilst your dough balls are in the oven, you can be doing this, because you need to bring them out slightly before the end of their cooking time. And then you're going to brush this garlic butter that you've now made onto the dough balls for the last 5 minutes of cooking. So the dough balls have been in about 18-19 minutes now. What you need to do is get a pastry brush. And if you don't have one, don't worry, you can use a spoon. Is you brush your garlic butter around on your pastry brush, and then you dab or swipe over the top of your garlic dough ball. And you just keep repeating that process. For all of the dough balls, and then put it back in the oven for 5 minutes. If your dough balls are a little bit hard, they're harder than you expected, so I'm soft at the bottom, a bit harder on top, you may want to reduce your cooking time for the next 5 minutes, but if they are still quite soft, you can see the inside of this bit here is still slightly dark in colour. That means it's still slightly raw in the middle. You want a nice pale colour. That there is cooked. So as you can see with this one, it's slightly darker on the inside still. So the middle of your dough balls is still slightly raw. They do need that extra bit of time. Once you put the garlic butter back on, back in the oven. I have washed up all the equipment. I have cleaned down all my sides. Done all of that while my dough balls were cooking in the oven. And as you can see, here are the results. Just a quick check to make sure that the inside of the dough ball is cooked, to make sure it's not raw. That's probably one of the biggest ones. The colour looks pale pretty much all the way around. Just to be sure, I've cut one open, and as you can see, pale, fluffy, exactly what we're looking for. Just give them a taste. Yummy. Lovely. Crunchy on the outside, soft in the middle. Not too much garlic, which is the main thing. Easy garlic dough balls. Enjoy. Take 5 answers. Yeast is actually a fungi, and it converts sugar into alcohol. We use it in baking because it produces carbon dioxide, creating lots of air bubbles, making bread rise. Number 2, the scientific term for sugar is glucose. And number 3, carbon dioxide and CO2.